Okay, thank you very much indeed, Will. That was absolutely fantastic. Pleasure to have you here. We're going to move on to the next session now. This is going to be chaired by Eloise Todd of Best for Britain. I will just introduce Eloise. She is a true northerner, having grown up in Hull before studying politics at Newcastle University, and she is apparently a huge Hull City fan. She has worked at the European Parliament as a policy advisor, specialising in development policy and relations with Africa, Caribbean and Pacific countries, followed by working to enhance transparency in the oil, gas and mining industries. Since January last year, Eloise has been the Chief Executive Officer of Best for Britain, one of the leading anti-Brexit campaign groups who have run some eye-catching campaigns, such as the current one inviting people to press a big red stop button on Brexit. Good idea. So I welcome Eloise Todd.
Thank you. These switched on. Yeah. Thanks very much, everybody. It's an absolute honour to be here today and chairing this part of the conference. And what an absolutely relevant topic for today. Not only do we have to secure a people's vote, but we won't do that unless and until we make the case for what Britain can do to resolve all those issues that Will brought up in his brilliant opening speech. So this section is very relevant to that. And I'm delighted to welcome up, if I can ask all of the panel to come up and join me now. We've got Alex Sobel, MP, Julie Ward. Julie Ward, MEP. Diana Wallis, former MEP, and now of the Yorkshire Party, and Paul Salveson, who needs no introduction really in these parts. Welcome. So we're going to discuss how to bridge the north-south divide, a hugely relevant topic for Brexit. And looking forward to that. If I can ask Alex to start off this section, please, wherever you want to. MP for North West Leeds on his own patch. Brilliant to have you. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank the organisers for inviting me. The topic we've got today is hugely relevant, as Eloise said. It underlines why, actually, we lost the referendum. The north-south divide goes right back to the story of the referendum. Why people voted to leave wasn't really about taking back control, the Human Rights Act, or even controlling immigration. Brexit is a symptom of a simmering and long-held discontent and anger amongst our deindustrialised, left-behind communities that disproportionately are here in the north of England. Without addressing this, and without offering a compelling alternative to these communities, we must acknowledge that we risk not only losing a second referendum, but the process of having one, disengaging these communities altogether from the political process. I wasn't an MP in June 2016. I was an activist, campaigning for the Remain vote, desperately warning everyone that I could about the harm and suffering that we caused to the worst off in our community. The decision was to leave the European Union. It was impossible not to notice the difference in the communities that were heavily leave and communities that were heavily remain. Leeds is a story of that. In North Leeds, where I live, where I now represent, it's more affluent and people overwhelmingly vote remain. If you stepped outside of that to other areas of the city, it was heavily leave. And you could see those huge disparities between those communities. And not just here. In Doncaster, Casford, Wakefield, Rotherham, all those disparities played out across our region. Those communities still reeling from the closure of the pits, the mills, the factories, the high rates of unemployment, casualisation, loss of social housing, higher rates of poverty, lower life expectancies, all played into the narrative of having to kick someone and something And that something was the European Union. I'm sure you all know, this is a narrative you've all heard before, but people looked, at London, at the southeast. They saw that although there are obviously areas of poverty there is rising prosperity, and they were being left behind. And the country that we have is a tale, of two-speed country where we're being left behind and they're going ahead. They see the investment in the south, Crossrail, high-speed rail, huge housing developments, high-tech industries, where we're still, we're still on pacers, we still have unregulated buses, we still have falling down buildings, underfunded local authorities, closing libraries, closing leisure centres. Unless we offer a different vision, a different path, unless we can rebalance that economy, if we ask the same question, we are going to get the same answer. So here are some of the things we can do. Let's rebalance that transport investment. Let's get rid of those trains. Let's bring High Speed 3 on board. Let's regulate the bus services. Let's start local bus companies. Then devolution. I know this is Paul's expert subject, but let's have a devolution, not that's crumbs from the table of Whitehall, but proper fiscal devolution. We should be asking Yorkshire for what they have in Scotland. Third, we must work with our friends and neighbours in Europe to ensure that we're not only prepared for the fourth industrial revolution, a revolution that's coming very quickly, but that we're the leaders. This was the place where the industrial revolution started. We are literally meters from Holbeck and Hunslet, which were the cradles of the industrial revolution in the world. So we need to look at decarbonising our heat, electric vehicles, low-carbon housing, the hydrogen revolution, and we need to be in the European single market to exploit those opportunities, to sell those to our neighbours in Europe, and to be able to take that forward. I co-authored a pamphlet with Catherine West, Yanis Varoufakis, and Richard, who's here, about how we can have from a left perspective, a left relationship with Europe. You can get a copy on the stall, the Open Labour stall, that's publish the pamphlet, or you can download it online. The pamphlet was part of a series called Owning the Future. That is what we need to do. That's what the north of England needs to do. We need to be owning the future. We need to be ahead, and we need to use that not just for the sake of jobs here, but for the future of our planet and the future of our economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks very much. Going to move now to another brilliant Northern politician, Julie Ward, MEP, great social justice activist, as well as being an MEP. Over to you, Julie.
Thank you. It's really amazing to be here. I represent the northwest of England, but my home is actually just across the border in County Durham. And I moved there in 1984 at the tail end of the miners' strike. My village is a Category D village, which means that in 1951, it was one of 121 villages earmarked by the local authority for disinvestment. Effectively, these villages were expected to die as they were not seen to serve any economic purpose. Schools closed, shops shut, the buses didn't come, and neither did mains gas or inside toilets. I only got gas in my village in the past 18 months. People moved away. Some villages did die, and they disappeared completely. But many people refused to leave their homes, and eventually the plan was abandoned. But the damage had already been done. People no longer believed that politicians looked after their best interests. Indeed, we are not all in this together. And I was talking about the 1950s, so I'm going even further back. If you treat people as if they have no value other than as an economic statistic, they will disengage, they will withdraw from public life, and they'll be easy prey for media-savvy uber-nationalists, as has been proved by the 2016 referendum. So how to bridge that divide? Well, I know we're here talking about the North power failure, but I want to broaden that, because it isn't just a North-South divide. It is also a generational divide. It's a London and everywhere else divide. It's a divide between city hubs and end-of-the-line towns. And we need to tell people, all the people in all our communities, that they matter. We need to invest in better quality, inclusive democracy everywhere. And I don't just mean the usual suspects in focus groups or tick box exercises. We need to have projects like participatory budgeting, not with small amounts of money, but with huge infrastructure projects. We need joint programs and twinning projects, for example, school and informal education programs that bring children and young people and their families together across the UK. A bit like twinning projects, so that Blackpool and Great Yarmouth and South Shields and Torquay can all come together to share common problems and create solutions. Durham, Derbyshire, Welsh, Scottish and Cornish mining families have a shared history. They are migrants here in our United Kingdom. Eco-cities and the ripple effects from those. We should be investing in those kind of projects. I went to a brilliant conference in Birmingham a couple of years ago that Wayne Hemingway was at. And Wayne Hemingway is from Lancashire, from a town that voted out. But he recognised, that if you set up really interesting industrial projects in a hub, you can make sure that the benefits of that hub roll out to all the regional smaller areas if you do it right. We need to go further than that, though. We need to reach out to the twin cities and regions across Europe. So, for example, Gothenburg and Newcastle, and you will all be hearing in the news this weekend about the Swedish elections and about the problems that Sweden is facing, particularly the city of Gothenburg. So we need to bring our European peripheral areas together. We need to twin Gdansk with Hull, southern Italy with Cornwall, Cumbria with Transylvania. We need, why not? We need to think about a whole range of really extraordinary networks that we're already part of and champion those. So, for example, the Dark Sky Network, the geoparks, these networks already exist and they champion some of the places that are in these forgotten parts of the UK. So we need to bring those projects to the fore and to give people a different sense of themselves and their identity as Europeans and indeed as global citizens. We need to bring generations together, and I'm really proud that in my constituency, the Merseyside pensioners began a project called Generations United Against Austerity. They marched in Birmingham together, and they also had a conference themselves, and the pensioners invited the students, and they're all suffering. The students can't afford to, cook a hot meal, and the pensioners can't afford to turn the heating on. But when those two groups of people came together, they realized that they needed to work together, not to be against each other. I'm nearly finished. We need lifelong learning. We need trade union learning. We need education, citizenship, and intergenerational learning, because we're not going to solve the problem of how people don't understand or misunderstand their European identity and their rights and responsibilities as citizens of Europe if we're not teaching them about their rights and responsibilities as pupils in their schools, as villagers in their own village, as townspeople, as regionalists. We've got to get people to understand that you can participate in decision making from the earliest age. We need more cities of culture, and I think it's insignificant that Hull, which is a city of culture, last year, and had an amazing year-long, incredible program, and is now got some special status and more money to be able to build on that legacy. It's not It's not a coincidence that those programmes were built on the back of and model the European Capitals of Culture project. And you know, Leeds may well have won the capital. You probably would have won it, yes. But you know, let's see that how important it is to invest in our culture. It was fantastic that Peter talked about that. And I worked in culture and arts before I worked in politics, so I'm always going to champion the power of the arts and culture to give voice to who we are as people. And finally, we have to invest in the infrastructures that enable all communities to access the near and the far, so that an old person can pick up a pension from the post office by getting on a bus, but they can also get on a train or a plane and go and enjoy a holiday in Spain with their grandchildren. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Julie. Fantastic. Now I'd like to introduce Diana Wallis, former MEP, now of the Yorkshire Party, and deserves a special mention for having taken on David Davis twice in recent elections, so good on you for that.
Thank you, thank you very, very much, and thank you for organising this. It gives some of us, I'm sure all of us here, the sense that maybe the tide is beginning to turn. Let me make clear, I am a lifelong European, professionally as a lawyer, politically, and most importantly, emotionally. I'm one of those awkward people that insist we do want an ever closer union amongst the peoples of Europe, and that means you and I and everybody else that was just mentioned. But what I want to do is talk about three things briefly in terms of the North-South divide, and particularly Yorkshire, because this was the region I was privileged to represent in the European Parliament for 12 years, and that's the region that I care about passionately. Three things I want to talk about: size, EU regions, and constitutional chaos. Size, it matters. I've just come back from a conference in Riga, in Latvia, one of the three Baltic states. First time I ever visited Riga was in 1992. It was a sad, dreary, dismal, ex-communist place, but hopeful of a better future. The city I saw over the last few days was vibrant, young, booming, exciting, restored historical buildings, new modern buildings, and a sense of its national identity and its European identity. How many population, or how large a population does it have? About 2 million, just short of. Yorkshire has 5 million in its population. Now, within a smaller population like that, within a smaller unit, I would make 2 points. First of all, you have, as you can see in somewhere like Latvia, the economic heft to do something, but you also have the social connectedness to feel safe and strong in a bigger world. And I would say those are the two things we should feel here in Yorkshire, and the people that felt they wanted to make a statement about Brexit should have been able to feel that they could do something about the future of the region and their lives here, and that they felt connected and part of something closer to them. Then let me tell you something about EU regions. You know, there's always this UKIP story that somewhere in Brussels there's a map on the wall, and it's Europe that has invented regions. I don't think we agree with that in Yorkshire, do we? I think it's our region, it belongs to us. But what Europe has done, has encouraged through regional policy, the development, growth and assistance to the various regions of Europe. What they want to do with those funds is up to them. But Europe has always stood there as a friend and a helper in time of need, direct to the regions. Although my experience was, in our case, Westminster always got in the way. If you look at other countries, the size of the UK in Europe, countries like Germany and France, they have devolved regions with power that can do something to help people feel that they can have a better future, control over education, control over health, to make people's lives better. But that control is nearer at hand, and there is no block in the middle from a government, a centralised government, not in the same way that we experience here. Then let me say a few words about constitutional chaos, because that's what it comes down to. We are in a chaotic situation. Yes, we don't know how to organise referendums, advisory, not advisory. We don't know who should vote in them. We are hopelessly naive in terms of having a proper constitutional discussion. Now, if we solve Brexit, and I hope we will, if we don't, before or at the same time or during, solve the north-south divide, solve the distribution of power within our islands, then we are still going to have the same problems that bit us back in the referendum. We have got to solve the underlying problem of people feeling powerless and not listened to. And it goes on. You know, most of the local authorities around Yorkshire have agreed that there should be a one Yorkshire devolution deal. But Westminster still refuses it. The Archbishop of York, for heaven's sake, is willing to support and to coordinate a region-wide conversation. But we're not allowed to have it. So is it unusual that people should feel powerless and bitter in those circumstances? We need in Yorkshire, and probably in other regions, but it's Yorkshire I happen to care about, a proper constitutional convention system so that we, as the people of Yorkshire, can decide how we want to improve our transport, our education, our health service. Then we will feel in control. And look at Scotland, look at Wales, look at Northern Ireland, look at London. They all voted overwhelmingly pro. If you are certain and comfortable about having power more locally, then you are more comfortable with Brussels. It's London that's the problem. And I would have to... My last remark is this. We are now a very, very divided society. And that is so, so sad. But there are things that I believe can reunite us across this divide. I am proud now to be part of a party that campaigns for this region. We have people in our party from across all the other parties originally, but also people who are pro and against Brexit. And we live and we work together for the benefit of this region, and that is our priority, and just translate that to also the benefit of our country as a whole. Thank you.
This one. Okay. Thank you, Diana. And now our last speaker before I open it up to the floor for Q&A, Paul Salveson, Visiting Professor, University of Huddersfield, who's got a rich history in the devolution question. So, Paul, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And greetings from Lancashire. But I am a visiting professor at the University of Huddersfield, but I'm not speaking on behalf of the University of Huddersfield. Neither am I speaking on behalf of my employer, which is a major transport operator based in mainland Europe and with extensive interests across the UK. And those omissions are significant because there's a real nervousness amongst both academic institutions and major businesses about putting their heads above the parapet for good reasons. They don't want to be seen as being political. And just reading the magazine of my professional institution, the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, on the train coming over today, there's a big feature on Brexit, and underlying all the different features is a real nervousness about what the impact on the transport sector is going to be. And I think the view within industry is that we'll fear for the worst, but we'll try to make the best of what will inevitably be a very bad job. But it's a real pity that we're not able to articulate these concerns out there in public. So if I'm speaking on behalf of anybody, it's the Hannah Mitchell Foundation, which is a pan-northern cross-party political campaign for democratic devolution in the north, and also the Northern Umbrella, which is a much broader body trying to promote all the good things that are already going on within the north. So I think in terms of what we're looking at now, my key message in these next few minutes, echoing what's already been said, is that the north really does need a very, very strong voice in what's going on at the moment, which we don't have. Scotland has a strong, powerful voice raising its concerns, so does Wales. Not too sure about Northern Ireland at the moment, but certainly Scotland and Wales are putting very, very strong cases for their interests. And we do have very clear, strong, distinct interests within the north. And this isn't to separate ourselves off from the other regions and nations, or even London for that matter. I'm certainly not anti-London per se. It's about the seats of power and those institutions that are based in London, which I have a bit of a down on. And at the moment, we've got elected mayors who have been doing a very good job. Andy Burnham, a lot of time for him, but they are very, very partial. We're not getting people speaking on behalf of the north as a whole because those institutions don't exist. And one of the ironies of the situation, which other speakers have already commented on, has been that the places that will actually suffer most from Brexit are the places that voted so strongly to actually come out of the EU. And there's lots of complex reasons for that, without a doubt. But I think some of the really big issues facing us in the next 10 years, certainly Brexit, and I would say from a transport perspective, the threat of HS2, and it was interesting when Alex talked about the need to invest in transport infrastructure. He mentioned HS3, which is about linking the great conurbations of the north of England, east to west, but didn't actually mention HS2. One of the funny things about the current debate, actually, is that a lot of the leavers are very anti-HS2 for all the wrong reasons, I would say. What HS2 will actually do is to suck economic wealth out of the north of England in a general sense, and also transport investment will very much be focused on HS2 rather than getting the desperately needed investment in infrastructure and rolling stock that the north of England actually needs. But one of the other ironies of it, going back to the democratic deficit, is that we do have a transport for the north, which has considerable powers, and I hope they get more. But trying to influence transport for the north, which does have politicians represented within the organisation, but trying to actually influence it is next to impossible. If I was in Scotland and I wanted to influence what was going on in terms of Transport Scotland, there's an MSP who has a specific brief on transport. You can talk to them, you can talk to your MSPs. There's a direct line of accountability there, which we don't have. So we've got some of the institutions there already, but none of the governance. So it's good to see local authorities are getting together on a pan-northern basis. It's great to see events taking place like this, and hopefully it will point towards the need for getting representative regional structures. That's why I really welcome the plans for One Yorkshire. I hope we'll get a One Lancashire as well and be able to heal those past divisions and stop fighting the Wars of the Roses, which I think we stopped a long time ago, actually. So here's to a Northern Alliance, but which links up with the other nations and regions of England, which re-establishes a friendly relationship with the Republic of Ireland. How horrible to see all the old, hoary, anti-Irish racism coming out at the moment. You know, we really need to be going beyond that and building up relationships with Ireland, but also other parts of Europe. And that's why the idea of the Europe of the regions is such a tantalising and exciting project. But if all this goes ahead, we'll be much, much further away from it. So good luck in your endeavours, and congratulations to Leeds. I hope we'll see something like this over in the Northwest fairly soon as well. So good luck in your campaigning. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. It's time to open up the floor for questions. So if you keep them really brief so we can get through a lot, please, and tell me who you are, who you're directing your question to. Gentleman there, please, and another one at the back. Do we have a roving mic? Oh, I've got it. Have I got to run around?
I think we're using those.
Oh. Do these work at all? Yeah, they do. Ah, yeah. All right, good. So one here, one right at the back, and then there's one right at the front as well.
I go to the back and then come round. Oops, sorry. Where's the gentleman at the back?
Hello, I'm kind of new to this. I'm Chris from Salford. I just wanted to ask, especially thinking about political campaigns, for people on the street, and those of us sort of ordinary mortals, what can we do to help the campaigns for things like devolution and maybe sort of regional planning and so on? I just wonder what the panel could say about that, what specifically someone on the street could do, people who have jobs and things that they have to do around all of this.
Thank you. Do you want to give a quick
Wear my Hannah Mitchell hat. Can you hear me all right with it? Well, I think at the moment the whole devolution debate has almost been put in the sidings, to use a railway analogy, because people are so concerned about Brexit. But I don't think it will go away, and I really do strongly hope, and this isn't a party political point, I think there are lots of people in the Labour Party, as well as the Yorkshire Party, Lib Dems, Greens, and even some Tories as well, who do want to see more democratic devolution than what we've got. And I think Yorkshire, hate to say it, being born and bred in Boughton and in Lancashire, but Yorkshire is ahead of the game and it's pressing for One Yorkshire. So I think if Yorkshire can really unite behind that idea, there will be great gains to be made in other parts of the north and other regions as well. Because it does actually make sense as an economic unit, but also as a cultural unit. And I think Will Hutton's point about the importance of culture was very, very well made. And I think in the past, I think politicians who've been pro-devolution have ignored the cultural aspect. But it is important, and it's not reactionary and backward-looking. It's very, very modern and progressive.
Thanks. Do you want to very quick?
I think it's really important to understand what devolution means. That it means that real devolution means that we collect the taxes and then we spend them on the services, and that we're in charge of them, not Whitehall anymore. And that's very important to tell people. I think it's very important we have public pressure, petitions and all that, and people who are in Yorkshire, and I apologise, you're from Salford, but people in Yorkshire, there's the Yorkshire Devolution movement, and they can get involved with they have online campaigns and social media and all that sort of thing. I'm sure there's something similar in Lancashire, but I don't really cross the border, so I wouldn't know. But in Yorkshire, there's the Yorkshire Devolution movement, which people who are non-party political or party political want to be involved in, non-partisan campaign can be involved in.
Thanks, Diana.
Well, there'd be a simple answer if you're in Yorkshire, of course. You could come and join the Yorkshire Party. However, as has already been said, there are plenty of cross-party initiatives, but I think what is important is that all parties, to a certain extent, have got behind the One Yorkshire idea, and it's important that we keep that going. But there is, it seems to me, a relationship, a strong relationship between this and people's feelings about Brexit. I think it was very interesting in the week, there was some opinion polls, but there was one in particular that showed the biggest change in a constituency in the country was in Barnsley South, where the change had been in the order of 18% from Leave to Remain. Now, what's happened in Barnsley South? First of all, Barnsley had, along with Doncaster, a referendum on devolution. Then their MP stood for the mayorship and won the mayorship of South Yorkshire. So there is possibly, I would say, a sense there that power is coming back locally. And I've little doubt that that helps in not feeling so anti-Brussels, because you feel more in control locally.
Chris from Salford, I just wanted to answer your question about how to campaign. And I think, we know that the campaigns in the referendum were really appalling, that we weren't doing creative things with the campaigning. But we have to be human in the way we campaign, and I think we have to make campaigning fun. So, for example, cake's a good idea, yeah. It's all the things that are happening with the Remain campaigns are fantastic. Music, theatre, colour, creativity, fun, all those things actually engage people. So the Brexitometer that's going around and about, it's an interactive thing, so that when people are not just being talked at, it's not just a clipboard, how are you going to vote? It's a much more engaged interaction. That's the way that I think we should be campaigning on lots of issues, not just on this.
Thank you. I'm going to take a few more questions so we can rattle through as many as possible. Please, sir.
Okay. My name is Mike Collier. I was the first chief executive of One North East, which was the regional development agency for the northeast of England. The equivalent in Yorkshire was Yorkshire Forward. And I really want to strongly support what Diana has said. I've had cause to look back on what happened during the period of the regional development agency in the northeast of England. The northeast, at the implementation of the RDA, was all the indices were in the wrong direction, moving further and further away from the rest of the country, poorest region in the country. I have to confess it still is, but looking at the statistics of the period of the Regional Development Agency, it had the fastest growth outside London in new GVA, that's gross value added per head of population. It had the second most successful number of new businesses created. And its unemployment fell much faster than the national averages. Now, you may say it had a lot of ground to make up, but something real happened with the Regional Development Agency. It missed a trick in the northeast by not voting for an elected assembly. But I think there's a real prospect that if we could have those kind of regional activities with real devolution, we could make some very real progress. They did abolish all the RDAs except one, and the one they left was in London.
Good point. Thank you. I'm just going to take one more question. The lady at the front, please. You got.
Lady.
Hello, I'm Pauline Allen from Leeds for Europe. I think my question's kind of been answered in a way, but when we're out on the streets talking to people, we're up against such a lot. A, the media. B, the fact that people don't engage with you when you talk because they're just not interested. They feel there's the us and them attitude, and it's really hard to get through to these people. And, we have had cakes on the stall, and it's just so difficult to get through to people, and so the odds are so against us. through the media, and which seems to grab all the negative headlines. How do we do it?
I mean, if I can just abuse the chair for a second, I'd say don't lose hope. We launched the report that Diana talked about. People are shifting in droves, and it's a bit split along party divides. Tory voters do unfortunately seem to be hardening towards Leave, but the shifts in Labour constituencies in particular are absolutely enormous. It's more to the magnitude of 5 to 15% shifts. Sorry? There won't be a general election. Parliament won't vote for a general election. Do you want to, Alex?
I mean, first of all, you know, I'm a Labour MP. You know, being hostile media is, you know, what we deal with all the time. You know, that's built into the price. I mean, the reality is that does anybody in this room think the government's going to sign a deal with the EU? Who thinks there's going to be a deal? Nobody, right? So if there's no deal, the Labour Party's got 6 tests. Those 6 tests won't be met. The Labour Party is moving. Keir Starmer said that all options are on the table, and the Labour Party is not going to allow a situation where we just drop out of the EU without a deal, because that will mean millions of jobs in this country. Mike's point is very prescient. You know, in the northeast, there's a lot of manufacturing jobs. If you think about companies like Nissan and Hitachi and others, they are not going to stay under a no-deal Brexit. They can't. They won't be able to make the trains. They won't be able to make the cars, right? So I'm answering your question. Please don't heckle me while I'm answering your question, right? So that's the direction we're going in, and that's the movement. That's the movement in the party. If you're saying to me that since the referendum day and now Labour Party policy hasn't moved, that is very untrue. Our party policy is moving, and our policy is moving with our voters, and that's the way it's going.
Thanks. Diana and Julie.
Maybe I can just go back to Mike and what was said about the RDAs. But this was a huge shame. Here in Yorkshire, Yorkshire Forward obtained great swathes of investment into our region. And the fact that the government should have decided to disabolish all of the RDAs without any consultation, without any thought for what the consequences might be. I mean, that was one of the things, I have to say, that made me most angry with my former party, because I think that did so much damage, and then to have to recreate these so-called LEPs, which divide up what was a far bigger unit, which is what I described before, with more heft. So we need something back with the same power, the same clout that the RDAs had, but with local accountability and political control. That was all you needed to do, insert accountability.
I'm just looking, Pauline, okay, I'm speaking in Leeds next Friday night, Left Against Brexit, okay? I'm with my leader, all right, but I am pro-European, and it's my job to persuade him and all the people around him and all the other people in the Labour Party, as somebody who knows about Europe, because that's where I work, it's my job to continue to persuade him and everybody, you know, who is still worried, because people are worried. It was a horrendous thing that happened to our country. So I'm still doing that, and I think if you give up, then you might as well not be here. None of us are going to give up, are we? But you were shaking your head. Don't. Okay? Sorry. You know, I used to work in the arts. I never ever had so much applause when I was in theatre. But we're also working with trade unions. We're working with people who share the Labour Party's values. And we're reminding Labour Party members and the leadership and all the Labour people who are very worried about what happened, because we are worried about it. We're persuading them and reminding them that Labour was a pro-European party, and that we also have a duty to stay in solidarity with our socialist comrades across Europe, because Brexit is an abandonment of solidarity.
Brilliant. Just going to see if we can squeeze in a couple more questions. Gentleman at the front, and do we have the woman just on the end there? Thanks.
Hello, I'm John from Wakefield. It's not a question, actually, it's just pertinent to the last the lady that was getting disheartened. Our Constituency Labour Party meeting last Friday passed a motion, this is Wakefield, which voted leave significantly, passed a motion to conference to support debate on Brexit and to support a people's vote. That's all I've got to say, but it's just to show that, I mean, I've only been a member of the Labour Party about 3 years, but people like me are making a small difference, and I'm very proud that we've done that. And it may not make any difference, but there are tens and tens of constituency Labour parties have put that to conference, and if it makes a difference, I'm really pleased that we are making a difference, and we're going to affect the way Labour are. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Claire. I'm from Meltham, which is near Home Firth. Alex, I've written to Thelma Walker. I've heard the 6 points that must be met. It's not clear, it's not strong, it's not consistent. So what I'd really like to know, Alex, is what you're doing about getting Jeremy Corbyn to support a people's vote and to do it now and not in 10 weeks' time.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the big thing is Labour Party conference, right? That is our sovereign policy making body. The GMB shifted its policy last week. Unison looks like it's going to shift its policy. They're half the delegates at conference. You know, CLPs up and down the country, just about Wakefield. I think over 150 constituents now have passed some form of motion around, you know, remaining in the EU or a second referendum or European, you know, single market or something in the realm of Remain, you know, so that things are on the march. And I've been clear. I wrote a pamphlet. Come and have a read of my pamphlet. You know, I gave Keir Starmer a copy of the pamphlet. A copy of the pamphlet's gone to Jeremy Corbyn's office. John McDonnell's got a copy of the pamphlet. You know, I don't, people might have the wrong impression of how being a Labour MP works. I don't get a meeting every week with Jeremy Corbyn to discuss all my concerns, you know. I haven't seen Jeremy Corbyn since July, so, you know, I don't, you know, that's not really how it works. But we are putting the pressure on. We are putting the pressure on collectively. MPs, MEPs, City Labour parties, trade unions. We are on the move, yeah? This is coming.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks. Any of the other panellists want to give final word, tiny final word?
Just very quickly, and it's not particularly rousing, but what I would urge you to do is to get out of your comfort zones. Yeah, great having the trade unions and the Labour Party on side, but there's a lot of support out there, latent support, people who are a bit nervous about putting their heads above the parapet in the business community and in academia, and it's these people who are going to be very, very directly affected, and they can be won over. We've not got much time to do it, but I think in terms of influencing the wider public, if a trade union leader stands up and says, well, yeah, Brexit, terrible, Francis O'Grady's fantastic, you know, great TUC leader, but in terms of the actual pull that they've got, it's really getting leading figures from the business community in Yorkshire and the north of England as a whole, saying, look, we are really going to suffer, jobs are going to be lost, businesses are going to close down if this goes ahead. And I think that will be very, very telling in terms of winning the argument, both for a people's vote and getting a positive outcome from that vote when it happens. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I just agree with what Paul said, really. I think we need to come out of our tribes. Desperately, we need to come out of our tribes, and we need to talk to the people who've never been in one, as has just been said, because they're the people that need to be listened to. And we need to find ways that I described, of trying to bring people together to find things that unite us and that we can work on together, that we can agree upon. Because at the moment we're standing like that, and we need to find a way of bringing us together. It's great to be in a room of people cheering about pro-European issues, but we need to recognise that there are an awful lot of people out there that still feel not listened to, don't want to know, and it's them, as Will Hutton said so eloquently, we've got to reach somehow or other.
I'll finish just by addressing Keir Starmer's 6 tests, which I can really believe in. However, and I've mentioned this to him this past week because he came to talk to us in Brussels, and he's frequently talking to us. It didn't talk about Ireland. It didn't talk about peace in Ireland. So if there's one thing that we really have to raise up the agenda, it's actually about Europe as a peace project and about how Brexit seriously threatens what is a very, very fragile peace in Ireland. It also threatens peace on our eastern borders. I have political responsibility for relations with Bosnia-Herzegovina and Kosovo. I was in the Balkans 2 weeks ago talking to some of our sister parties there. And Brexit has an incredibly destabilizing effect on the Western Balkans. So let's talk more about peace, okay? That was mentioned by Will and also by Richard.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Brilliant food for thought. Let's get out of our tribes. Best for Britain, we're very proud to campaign in a way that tries to reach out to Leave supporters. Let's do that. Let's get beyond our bubble. Thank you for Leeds for Europe for this amazing conference. Thank you, Alex Sobel, Julie Ward, Diana Wallis, Paul Salveson. Please give them a very big hand. Thank you.